The smoke rose from New Eden Colony like black fingers reaching toward the gray sky above Captain Lisa Morgan, and her squad moved through the wreckage with their weapons ready and their hearts heavy, because this was the third human settlement the Void Reapers had destroyed this month. Lisa had seen plenty of war in her 30 years, but nothing compared to what these alien monsters did to human colonies. They didn't just destroy buildings and kill people, they erased everything, leaving behind only twisted metal and ash where families once lived and children once played. Sergeant Katie Wells walked beside her and spoke through the radio in her helmet, saying, "Captain Morgan, we should check the shelter bunkers near the school district, because sometimes people survive in the underground areas when attacks happen." Lisa nodded and guided her team of 12 soldiers toward what used to be a neighborhood full of houses and gardens, but now looked like a graveyard made of broken concrete and melted steel beams. The Void Reapers' ships had appeared from nowhere just like always, and their weapons turned everything into dust and shadow. Private Nina Torres was the youngest soldier in the squad at only 19 years old. But she had sharp eyes that noticed things others missed, and she suddenly raised her hand to signal everyone to stop, because she saw movement in the ruins ahead. "Everyone get down and stay quiet," Lisa ordered, as they all took cover behind fallen walls and destroyed vehicles. She used her scanner to check for heat signatures, but the device showed nothing, which was strange because Nina definitely saw something moving. Then they heard it. A sound like singing, but not quite human, drifted through the air and made the hair stand up on their necks. It was beautiful and sad at the same time, like a mother singing to comfort scared children. The voice came from inside what looked like a collapsed storage building about 50 meters away. Katie wanted to call for backup. But Lisa shook her head because something about that voice didn't feel dangerous, even though every rule said unknown aliens meant danger. The captain made a choice that would change everything and stood up slowly with her weapon lowered. "But ready, hello in there," Lisa called out and tried to keep her voice calm and friendly. "We are human soldiers and we want to help if anyone needs assistance." The singing stopped. For a long moment nothing happened, and Lisa wondered if she had made a terrible mistake by revealing their position. Then a figure emerged from the shadows of the broken building, and every soldier gasped at what they saw. The being stood 7 feet tall with skin that seemed to shift between silver and pearl colors, like moonlight on water. Her face was elongated but graceful with features that looked almost human, except for the large eyes that held swirling galaxies of color inside them. She wore torn robes that might have once been elegant, but now hung in tatters around her thin frame. But it was what she carried that made Lisa's heart skip. 3 small forms clung to the alien mother and peeked out with eyes just like hers, but filled with terror instead of stars. They were children, and even though they weren't human, Lisa recognized the universal look of young ones who had seen too much horror. Please, the alien woman spoke in accented English that sounded like multiple voices harmonizing together. "My children need safety, and the destroyers killed everyone else behind the alien family." A massive shadow suddenly moved, and every soldier raised their weapons in panic as something huge emerged from the ruins. It looked like a dragon from old Earth stories, but wrong somehow, with scales that seemed to eat light instead of reflect it, and eyes that held ancient wisdom and terrible sadness. The dragon thing positioned itself between the alien family and the human soldiers, but it didn't attack or even growl. It just watched with those impossible eyes while scars from plasma weapons showed across its midnight black hide. "Stand down, everyone," Lisa commanded, even though her own hands shook slightly. "These beings need help, not more violence." Katie moved closer to her captain and whispered, urgently, "Captain Morgan, you know what regulations say about first contact with unknown species during wartime. We have to report this to command immediately." Lisa looked at the alien children and saw how they trembled against their mother just like human kids would do, and she made another choice that broke all the rules by saying, "We report after we get them somewhere safe, because I won't leave children in a war zone." The alien mother took a careful step forward, and her voice filled with desperation, as she said, "My name is Celara, and these are my younglings Lua and Nex and Pip, who are all I have left after the Dark Ones destroyed our refuge ship and killed my bonded mate." The dragon moved then, and everyone tensed, but it only lowered its huge head toward the children, who reached out tiny glowing hands to touch its snout with obvious affection, like kids petting a family dog. That is Shadowman, Solara explained while tears that looked like liquid starlight ran down her face. He protected us when our ship burned and brought us here, but he is hurt and tired and cannot fight anymore. Nina Torres broke protocol by stepping forward and removing her helmet to show her face and said, "They're just refugees, Captain. Just like the people we've been trying to save from the Reapers." Lisa knew this moment would define her career and maybe her life. But looking at those alien children, she saw every human child she had failed to save in this war, and she couldn't add more young souls to that list even if they weren't her species. Solara seemed to sense the decision forming and added quickly, "My children have abilities that could help in your war against the destroyers because they can weave light into solid forms and sense the dark ships before they arrive." As if to demonstrate, little Pip, who looked no older than a human 5-year-old, raised one tiny hand, and light gathered around those small fingers, before forming into a perfect butterfly made of pure radiance that fluttered. "Around the soldiers' heads we offer our gifts freely." Solara continued with growing hope in her voice. "If you just let us stay and give my children a chance to grow up without running and hiding." The ground suddenly shook, and distant explosions reminded everyone that the war wasn't pausing for this meeting. Lisa had to decide fast. "Load up, Katie," finally said, and surprised everyone by supporting her captain. "These kids have been through enough already, and we can sort out the paperwork later." The squad moved to help the alien family with Nina and 2 others carefully approaching the injured dragon, who allowed them to examine his wounds. The creature was definitely hurt with deep burns across his body that still smoked slightly. As they prepared to leave the ruins, another figure stepped out from behind the dragon and made everyone jump in surprise. This one looked more human, except for the pointed ears and sharp features that belonged in fantasy stories. She wore armor that seemed made of shadow itself and moved like smoke given form. Her eyes held depths of experience that didn't match her youthful appearance, and geometric tattoos on her visible skin seemed to shift and move on their own. "I am Whisper," she said in a voice like wind through empty places, "and I guard those who have lost everything to war." The dragon shadowmen moved to stand beside her, and Lisa realized they were bonded somehow, like Solara had been bonded to her dead mate. "You brought them here," Lisa said, and it wasn't really a question. Whisper nodded once and replied, "Your species has something the others lack, which is why I guided Solara here after watching so many worlds burn." "What do we have that's so special?" Katie asked with suspicion, clear in her voice. "You adopt strays." Whisper answered simply, "You make families from strangers and protect cubs that aren't your own, which is rarer than you might think among the stars." The conversation had to end as more explosions sounded closer, and Lisa gave rapid orders to get everyone moving. They would have to travel fast to reach the extraction point where their transport waited. Solara carried Pip while Lua and Nex walked on their own, though they stayed close to their mother. The children's fear was obvious, but so was their trust in these strange humans who had chosen to help. Instead of harm, Shadowman moved with surprising grace for something so large, and his presence actually comforted the soldiers once they realized he was protective. Rather than threatening, Whisper seemed to glide more than walk, and her constant vigilance reminded Lisa of a mother wolf watching for danger. They made it halfway to the transport when Reapers attacked. The Reaper fighters came from above like metal wasps with weapons that turned air into fire, and Lisa ordered everyone to take cover as purple beams cut through the ruins around them, making stone explode into deadly fragments. Shadowman roared for the first time, and the sound shook the ground while he spread wings that seemed to absorb light itself. The dragon launched upward with impossible speed and grabbed a Reaper fighter in claws that punched through its armor like paper. "Get to the transport now," Lisa shouted while firing her rifle at another fighter, even though human weapons barely scratched their hulls. But then something amazing happened as little Lua raised both hands and light erupted from her small body, forming a dome shield over the fleeing group just as more purple beams struck down. The attacks hit the light shield and simply stopped, like they had hit a wall made of stars. Katie stared in shock while helping to carry the wounded dragon who had taken more damage, protecting them, and said out loud what everyone was thinking. "These kids really can help us fight." They reached the transport with Whisper moving like deadly smoke to deflect attacks with her shadow armor that seemed to bend space around. Her Nina Torres got the engines running while the rest loaded their unusual passengers. Inside the transport, Celera held her children close and sang softly to calm them while tears still ran down her face. The kids were exhausted from using their powers with Lua, barely able to keep her eyes open after creating that shield. "Thank you," Celera whispered to Lisa. "Your kindness will not be forgotten by the last of the Lumini." The flight back to Firebase Delta took 3 hours, and Lisa used the time to report to command, though she left out many details until they could arrive safely. General Patricia Hayes was not happy about unauthorized refugees, but agreed to wait before making decisions. When they landed at the military base, chaos erupted immediately. Soldiers surrounded the transport with weapons drawn because someone had reported unknown aliens aboard, and the base went to high alert. Dr. Amy Foster pushed through the crowd with her medical team, and her eyes went wide when she saw the passengers stand down. Everyone, Lisa commanded with authority that came from years of leadership. "These beings are refugees under my protection, and anyone who threatens them will answer to me." General Hayes arrived minutes later, and her face showed the strain of commanding during wartime as she looked at the alien family. Then at Lisa, with disappointment clear in her expression. "Captain Morgan, you have broken so many protocols I cannot even count them all," the general said, coldly. "Explain why I should not have you arrested right now." "Because these children can create shields that stop Reaper weapons," Lisa answered simply. "And their mother offers knowledge. We desperately need to survive this war." The next hours became a blur of activity as the refugees were taken to secured medical quarters, while debates raged among the command staff. Some officers wanted to treat them as prisoners, while others recognized the potential advantage they offered. Dr. Foster ran every scan possible on the alien family and reported her findings with barely contained excitement to the assembled leadership team in the briefing room. The Lumini, as Celera calls her species, are silicon-based life forms that somehow process photons at the quantum level, the doctor explained. Their children appear to be living solar batteries that can convert light into solid matter, temporarily. General Hayes remained skeptical and asked harsh questions about security risks, while other officers worried about resources and regulations. But Lisa noticed how Whisper stood silently in the corner, watching everything with ancient eyes that seemed to measure each human's character. Finally, Celera was brought in to speak for herself, and despite her exhaustion, she stood tall and proud before the human leaders. "My children are not weapons," she said firmly, but her voice shook with emotion. "We are the last of a peaceful species that built cities from aurora, light, and grew food from starshine." She gestured to where Lua and Nex and Pip waited under guard and continued. "The Void Reapers came to our world because they wanted our abilities. And when we refused to let them take our children, they burned everything. My mate died, holding the evacuation portal open so we could escape." "What exactly can your children do?" Katie Wells asked from her position by the door. Celera's expression mixed pride with sorrow as she explained. "Lua can weave light into barriers and weapons, while Nex can bend photons to create illusions that fool any sensor, and little Pip heals with light, though she is still learning control." "Prove it," General Hayes demanded. Celera looked to Lisa, who nodded permission, and called her children forward. They entered holding hands with Lua protectively in front, despite being only 8 years old in human terms. The demonstration amazed everyone as Lua created a sword of pure light that actually cut through steel plating, while Nex made perfect copies of himself that moved independently and fooled every scanner. Pip nervously made flowers of light bloom in her tiny palms that gave off warmth like miniature suns. But Whisper chose that moment to finally speak from her corner, and her words changed everything. "The Reapers have already captured other Lumine children," she said, making everyone turn to stare. "They twisted them into living weapons that drain stars and crack planets, which is why they hunt the remaining younglings so desperately." "How do you know this?" Hayes demanded. Whisper stepped forward, and shadows seemed to follow her movement as she answered. "Because I have fought the Reapers for 1,000,000 years, General, and I have watched them consume entire galaxies' worth of species. The room erupted in disbelief and arguments, but Whisper simply touched Shadowmend, who had been brought to the hangar for treatment, and the dragon's wounds began closing with threads of darkness. I am the last of the first ones, she continued without emotion. We were the initial species the Reapers destroyed at the beginning of their endless hunger, and I survived only by binding myself to the void between dimensions. She looked directly at Silara's children, and her expression finally showed something like hope. These younglings represent something the Reapers fear, which is evolution beyond their ability to consume, because Lumini children bond with those who protect them and share their gifts freely. What does that mean? Nina Torres asked from among the guards. It means, Silara answered while pulling her children close, that my younglings will grow stronger alongside humanity, and their abilities will adapt to help those who shelter them, which is why the Reapers fear Lumini human. Cooperation. General Hayes started to speak, but alarm suddenly blared through the base as multiple contacts appeared on the scanning screens. The Reapers had found them already and were coming in force. How did they track us here? Someone shouted. Over the noise they can sense Lumini children across star systems, Whisper said calmly. Like blood in water to sharks. Hayes had to make a decision fast, and Lisa could see the conflict in her commander's eyes between protocol and necessity, between fear and opportunity. If we fight them here, the whole base could be destroyed, Hayes said. Or we use what they fear against them, Lisa countered, gesturing to the alien children. We have allies who can create shields and illusions and healing light, plus a guardian who has fought them for eons. The general looked at Silara, who stood ready despite everything she had lost, and asked one question. Will your children fight to defend their new home? Silara's answer was simple, but carried the weight of a mother's promise. They will defend those who defended them. Hayes turned to her staff and gave orders that would change humanity's war. Prepare for battle and integrate our new allies into defensive positions, because we are about to learn if hope can beat hunger. Outside, the Reaper fleet grew closer, and everyone knew this battle would determine not just the fate of one base, but whether humanity would accept its role as protectors of the lost. Whisper moved to stand beside Lisa and spoke quietly. This is why I brought them here, Captain, because your species does something remarkable when threatened. What do we do? Lisa asked while checking her weapon. You adopt the danger and make it family, Whisper said, then added with something, almost like a smile, and family is the one force the Reapers never calculated into their endless equations. The first Reaper ships entered atmosphere as Firebase Delta, prepared for a battle that would echo across the stars. Dawn broke over Firebase Delta as purple fire rained from the sky, and the Void Reapers attacked with ships that bent space around them, making reality scream in protest. The human defenders fired everything they had, but most shots passed through. The enemy vessels like they were ghosts made of malice. Lisa Morgan stood on the wall with Silara and her children, while Whisper directed the defense with knowledge earned through a million years of war. The elf woman moved between gun positions, showing soldiers how to adjust their targeting to hit the brief moments when Reaper ships became solid. Lua, step forward now, Whisper commanded, and the 8-year-old alien child walked to the edge of the wall with determination that belonged on someone much older. The little girl raised her arms and light exploded outward from her small form, creating a barrier that stretched across the entire base. Just as the main Reaper bombardment began, purple beams that could melt mountains struck the light shield and simply stopped while Lua grimaced with effort. Human weapons fired through the shield without problem, and General Hayes stared in amazement as their missiles actually hit Reaper fighters that had to become solid to attack the barrier. Several enemy ships exploded in flames that burned impossible colors. Next, your turn, Whisper said, and the middle child nodded before closing his eyes in concentration. Suddenly, the sky filled with false images as hundreds of fake human fighters appeared around the base, making the Reapers split their fire in confusion. The illusions looked perfect, even fooling the base's own sensors, while real human pilots used the chaos to strike from unexpected angles. Katie Wells led a squad to defend the medical center where little Pip stayed with the wounded soldiers. The youngest Lumini child had refused to hide, and instead walked between the beds, touching injured humans with her glowing hands. A private, with half his chest burned, Owe gasped, as threads of light began knitting his flesh back together while Pip hummed the same sad, beautiful song her mother had sung in the ruins. The human doctors watched in awe as mortal wounds closed, leaving only faint scars. Outside, the battle raged with shadow men taking to the skies despite his injuries, and the dragon fought like a living shadow tearing through Reaper fighters with claws that existed in multiple dimensions at once. His roar shattered enemy shields while his presence seemed to inspire the human defenders. But the Reapers kept coming with larger ships emerging from fold space, and General Hayes realized they were badly outnumbered, even with their new allies. "We need to evacuate," Hayes shouted over the explosions, but Whisper appeared beside her like smoke. "No, General, because this is where we make our stand," the elf woman said while her tattoos blazed with geometric patterns. "They want the children, and running only delays the inevitable, so we must show them that humanity will not yield." A massive Reaper command ship descended through the atmosphere, and its presence made everyone feel cold despair creeping into their minds. This was no ordinary vessel, but something ancient and terrible that had consumed entire civilizations. Sylara pulled Lisa aside as the battle intensified and spoke urgently. "Captain, there is something you must know about why the Reapers fear my children so much." "Tell me," Lisa said while reloading her rifle. "The Lumini were not just light weavers but guardians of the quantum barriers between dimensions," Sylara explained quickly. "When the Reapers tried to take our world, they discovered that our children could lock them out of fold space and trap them in one reality." Lisa's eyes widened as she understood the implications. Because if the Reapers lost their ability to phase between dimensions, they would become vulnerable to conventional weapons. "Exactly," Sylara confirmed. "But using that power nearly killed my eldest children on our homeworld, which is why we fled rather than fight. The command ship opened fire with weapons that turned matter into nothing, and part of the base simply ceased to exist." Lua screamed as she tried to maintain her shield against attacks that defied physics while blood ran from her nose. Nina Torres ran to support the failing child and held her upright while shouting, "You can do this, little star warrior, because we believe in you." Something changed in that moment as the human soldiers' faith seemed to strengthen the alien child, and Lua's shield blazed brighter, pushing back against the entropy weapons. The connection between protector and protected created something new. Whisper watched this with satisfaction and pulled Captain Morgan to a tactical display, saying, "Now you see why I brought them here, because humans don't just fight for others, but with others, and that bond is what the Reapers cannot understand or counter." The command ship descended lower and a voice spoke, directly into every mind at once, making soldiers clutch their heads in pain. "Surrender the light, children, or watch your world burn like so many others." General Hayes looked at the alien family, then at her soldiers who stood ready to die for refugees. They had known less than a day, and she made the choice that defined humanity's future. Firebase Delta's response is no. She broadcast on all channels. "We protect those who seek shelter, and we stand with those who stand with us." The Reaper commanders' rage manifested as waves of psychic pressure. But something unexpected happened as Nex created an illusion so perfect it fooled even telepathy. The boy made it seem like the Lumini children had already escaped, making the Reapers hesitate in confusion. That moment of uncertainty was all Whisper needed as she spoke a word that hurt to hear, and shadow men dove from the clouds wrapped in void energy. The dragon struck the command ship's main weapon array while existing in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The weapon exploded and took a third of the Reaper vessel with it, while human forces pressed their advantage. Katie Wells led her squad in a desperate assault on grounded Reaper units using tactics Whisper had taught them to exploit the brief moments of solidity. But the cost was mounting as soldiers fell defending positions, and Nina Torres took a direct hit while shielding little Pip from shrapnel. The young private collapsed with wounds no human medicine could heal. Pip broke free from her mother's grasp and ran to the fallen soldier while tears streamed down her alien face. The 5-year-old placed both hands on Nina's wounds and poured all her light into healing. "Please don't leave," Pip whispered in her musical voice. "You saved me, so I save you, because that's what family does." Light exploded from the child in waves that washed over the battlefield, and wherever it touched, wounded soldiers found their injuries healing. Human and Lumini light merged into something neither species had created alone. The Reaper commander experienced fear for the first time in its ancient existence and ordered a retreat, but Whisper smiled coldly. Too late, she said, as Lua and Nex joined hands with their sister, the three children. Together reached out with their combined power and did what their parents had died attempting space around the Reaper fleet, suddenly crystallized as the Lumini children locked them into one dimension, and human weapons that had been useless suddenly tore through enemy hulls like tissue paper. The battle turned into a rout as Firebase Delta's defenders unleashed everything they had on enemies that could no longer phase away from damage. Shadowmend led human fighters in tearing apart the command ship while its commander screamed about impossibilities. When the last Reaper fled into fold space, the base erupted in celebration, but the victory came with revelations that would reshape the war. Dr. Foster's scans showed that the Lumini children had permanently bonded with their human protectors on a quantum level, and their abilities would now grow alongside humanity's determination. The symbiosis was unlike anything in recorded history. Solara wept with joy as she saw Nina Torres sit, up fully healed, while Pip giggled in the soldier's arms. The mother's next words carried across the base. "My children have chosen their new family, and the Lumini light will shine alongside human courage until the stars themselves burn cold." General Hayes stood before the assembled defenders, both human and alien, and made a declaration that every human colony would soon hear. "From this day forward, Earth stands as sanctuary for all who flee the Reaper's hunger and those who fight beside us. Become us." Whisper nodded with ancient satisfaction while Shadowmend curled protectively around the Lumini children, who had already begun teaching human technicians how to forge light into solid tools. The war was far from over, but humanity had gained more than allies because they had gained family who brought gifts beyond measure and bonds beyond breaking. 2 weeks after the battle at Firebase Delta, the Human War Council gathered in the underground bunker beneath New Geneva, where Earth's leaders argued about the fate of the Lumini children, while Solara waited outside with her younglings general. Patricia Hayes presented her report to the assembled admirals and politicians, showing footage of Lua creating light shields that had saved thousands of lives, but others saw only alien powers that scared them. "We should study these abilities and replicate them in weapons," Admiral Carla Baker said coldly. "If these children can lock Reapers in one dimension, then we need that power under human control. They are children, not laboratory experiments," Captain Lisa Morgan said from her position at the table where she had been called to testify. "The Lumini have already given us more than we could have hoped for." General Samuel Wright leaned forward with calculating eyes and suggested, "We could train the alien children as weapons specialists, because their abilities would make perfect soldiers if properly directed." Solara must have heard through the door because she entered without permission, and her galaxy eyes blazed with protective fury while her children huddled behind her. "You speak of my younglings like they are tools to be used," she said, and her harmonious voice cracked with emotion. "But they are children who have already lost their father and their world, and their entire species." The council members shifted uncomfortably, but Admiral Baker remained firm, saying, "This is war, and we must use every advantage or humanity will fall like your people did." Whisper materialized from shadow in the corner, making several officers reach for weapons before recognizing the elf guardian, who spoke with the weight of eons. "You want to know about war, then let me tell you about the first war," she said, stepping into the light where her moving tattoos seemed to writhe with memory. "I watched my people die 1,000,000 years ago when the Reapers were young and hungry." The room fell silent as Whisper continued her tale. "My species were called the Eternal Dawn because we lived between moments and could stretch seconds into centuries, but the Reapers found us and wanted our time-walking abilities. When we refused, they created weapons from our own captured children." She gestured to Shadowmend, who had somehow fit himself into the bunker despite his size, and the dragon's eyes held grief older than human civilization. "My mate here was not always a dragon, but an eternal dawn like me until the Reapers twisted him into a weapon," Whisper revealed. "Only our bond saved his mind while his body became this form that exists across dimensions." Katie Wells asked quietly, "How did you survive when your People died by becoming what they feared most. Whisper answered a guardian who would ensure no other species suffered alone, and who would guide the lost to those who might protect them. Which is why I brought Solara to humanity. Dr. Amy Foster entered with urgent news that changed everything as she connected her tablet to the main screen showing intercepted Reaper communications. We decoded their transmissions and found something horrible, Foster said with a shaking voice. The Reapers already have other Lumini children from refugee ships they caught. The screen showed images that made Solara collapse to her knees as twisted forms that had once been children like hers now served as living weapons that cracked planets open. These corrupted Lumini had their light turned to darkness and their faces showed only emptiness. My sister's children Solara wept while Lua, Anex, and Pip pressed close to comfort their mother. Those were my nephews and nieces who played with my younglings. Before the war, Admiral Baker stood up decisively saying, "This proves we need to weaponize our Lumini before the Reapers come for them too." No, Lisa Morgan slammed her fist on the table. "This proves we need to protect them because look what happens when children become weapons instead of staying children." The argument erupted with half the council wanting to use the Lumini abilities aggressively, while others supported protection, but Whisper raised her hand, and the room fell silent. From sheer presence, the Reapers are already coming here, she announced. In force larger than anything you have faced because they know the last free Lumine children are on Earth and they will not stop until they have them. How long do we have? Someone asked. 3 days, maybe 4. Whisper replied. The fleet that comes includes their harvester ships and the corrupted Lumini who will try to turn Solara's children. General Hayes looked around the table, then at the alien mother still crying for her lost family, and asked the crucial question. What do you need from us? Solara raised her head with tears still flowing but determination in her voice. Everything my people knew I will share, including how to grow food from starlight and heal with photons and forge, material stronger than any metal, but my children must remain children. Not weapons. Lisa Morgan stood with her decision made. We don't give up refugees and we don't sacrifice children no matter what advantages it might bring, because the moment we do that, we become no better than the Reapers. Some council members protested, but Nina Torres entered with other soldiers from Firebase Delta who had fought beside the Lumini, and they all stood with their captain. These kids healed us and protected us and fought beside us, Torres said firmly. So we'll do the same for them because that's what humans do. Whisper smiled, which was disturbing on her ancient features. This is why your species is different, because you choose compassion even when fear would be easier and protection even when exploitation would be profitable. The vote was called, and by a narrow margin, the council chose protection over weaponization, though Admiral Baker warned they might have doomed humanity. 3 days later, the skies darkened with Reaper ships that numbered in thousands while corrupted Lumini children flew between them like dark stars. Their light had been turned to consuming darkness that drained energy from everything they touched. Earth's defense fleets launched with every ship humanity could muster while Whisper and Shadowmen prepared for what might be their last battle. The elf woman pulled Lisa aside before the fighting began. Whatever happens, Captain, remember that you gave these children something their own species couldn't, which was choice, Whisper said. They choose to fight not because we forced them, but because you showed them love. The first wave hit like a tsunami of metal and malice as Reaper ships poured fire onto Earth's defenses while the corrupted Lumini children attacked with powers that made space scream. But Solara's children stood ready with their human defenders, and Lua spoke with wisdom beyond her 8 years. We fight for our new home and our new family because that is what you taught us. Nex added with quiet determination, we are not weapons, but we are warriors when those we love face danger. Little Pip just smiled and held Nina Torres' hand while saying, together we are stronger than alone. The final assault began, with humanity and their adopted alien family facing the combined might of the Reaper Armada and their twisted child soldiers. The battle would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of every refugee seeking shelter among the stars. General Hayes gave the order that would echo through history. All forces engage, and remember we protect our own, no matter where they were born. The sky exploded with light and shadow as two philosophies clashed, because the Reapers believed in taking and consuming while humanity believed in protecting and nurturing, and in that difference lay the hope of victory. The battle for Earth began with 10,000 Reaper ships darkening the sky, while corrupted Lumini children flew between them like fallen angels, with wings of consuming darkness. Their faces showed no emotion as they attacked the world that sheltered. Their free cousins Lisa Morgan led the defense from the command ship Defiance while Solara and her children stood on the bridge ready to fight. The alien mother's heart broke seeing corrupted younglings that she recognized as her sister's children, now turned into weapons. Those were sweet babies who loved to sing. Solara whispered as a corrupted child fired beams of dark light that drained power from human ships. Lua stepped forward with tears in her eyes, but determination in her stance and said, "Then we will sing them back to the Light Mother." The human fleet engaged with everything they had, while Whisper and Shadowmend led the counterattack. The dragon existed in multiple dimensions at once, allowing him to strike Reaper ships from angles that shouldn't exist, but the enemy numbers were overwhelming, and for every Reaper destroyed 10 more appeared from fold space. General Hayes coordinated the defense from Earth's surface while cities activated light shields that Lua had taught human engineers to build. The corrupted Lumini children attacked in waves, and their darkness met Lua's light shields in explosions that painted the sky in impossible colors. Nex created illusions of entire fleet movements that confused the Reapers while Pip stayed with the medical ships healing wounded pilots who got them back into the fight. Katie Wells noticed something strange about the corrupted children's attacks and called out, "They're holding back like something inside them fights against what they're being forced to do." Whisper confirmed this with ancient knowledge, saying, "The Lumini cannot be fully corrupted because their light comes from love and connection, which is why the Reapers need technological control, rather than true conversion." The battle raged for hours with human casualties mounting, but something beautiful happened as Earth's various nations forgot their differences and fought as one. Ships from former enemies flew wing to wing while soldiers, who had been rivals, now died protecting each other. Then the Reaper command carrier arrived and it dwarfed moons with its bulk. This ship was older than human civilization and housed something terrible. The Overmind itself had come. The entity spoke into every mind at once with a voice like dying stars. "Surrender the light, children, because your species is insignificant dust that exists only because we have not yet consumed you." Captain Lisa Morgan activated the global communication system, and her response became legend. "You want to know what makes humanity special? You parasite who feeds on civilizations." The Overmind waited with ancient arrogance. "We collect strays and protect kids who aren't even our species." Lisa continued while her voice carried across the solar system. "We adopt the abandoned and call them family, and mess with our adopted family. You cosmic bully, and you'll find out why they call us the devils of the void." The human response was nuclear fire as Earth's entire arsenal launched at once. Weapons considered primitive by galactic standards flew toward the Reaper fleet, but these missiles had been modified with Lumini technology. Lua and her siblings pooled their power and transformed the nuclear weapons into something new because where atomic fire met Lumini light, it created weapons that could wound even beings of entropy. The explosions tore holes in space itself. The Overmind screamed in rage and pain as its shields failed against weapons that shouldn't exist according to its million-year-old calculations. This was impossible because primitive species didn't create new fusion paradigms in mere weeks. But humanity had done the impossible because they didn't just use Lumini power, but merged it with human stubbornness and creativity. Dr. Foster had worked without sleep to blend technologies while soldiers had volunteered to test unstable prototypes. Shadowmend dove toward the command carrier with Whisper on his back, and the elf woman spoke words in her dead language that made reality remember what it was before the Reapers corrupted it. The dragon breathed void fire that burned across 17 dimensions. The corrupted Lumini children suddenly stopped attacking, as the Overmind's control wavered, and in that moment Solara's children reached out with their pure light. "Come home, cousins," Lua called, with her child's voice carrying impossible distance. "We have a new family who will protect you too." Nex created illusions showing Earth as sanctuary, while Pip's healing light washed over the corrupted children like a gentle rain. The three free lumini poured their love and hope across space. The corrupted children began to remember who they were before. The darkness took them, and their black light flickered with hints of color. Some began to turn on their Reaper masters, while others simply stopped fighting. No. The Overmind raged. This is not possible because love is weakness and connection is chains. That's where you're wrong, Monster, Katie Wells said over the comm as she led a boarding party onto a Reaper ship. Love is strength and connection is what makes us fight harder than any equation predicts. The battle turned as corrupted children broke, free one by one, and their light returned in bursts of color that painted hope across the void. Human ships pressed the advantage while freed Lumini children turned their power against their former captors. The Overmind made a final desperate attack and reached directly for Solara's children with tendrils of pure entropy, but every human on every ship stepped forward to block it. Millions of voices shouted as one, "You cannot have them." The combined willpower of humanity merged with Lumini light, and Whisper's ancient knowledge and Shadowmen's dimensional existence created something unprecedented, which was a psychic shield built from pure protective instinct. The Overmind recoiled as it experienced something alien to its existence because it felt what parents feel protecting children and what soldiers feel defending home and what friends feel standing together. Inside that emotional storm, it heard Sylara singing the lullaby she had sung in the ruins, but now amplified by every human who had ever loved a child. The simple melody carried power that algorithms couldn't calculate. The Overmind's form began to crack, and as it died, it asked one question in genuine confusion. Why do you protect those who are not yours? Because that's what makes them ours. General Hayes answered as she watched from Earth. They needed help and we could give it, so they became family. The Overmind shattered with a death scream that broke asteroids. But as it died, something wonderful happened because all the consumed essences it had hoarded for millions of years suddenly went free. Ghostly forms of 1 trillion murdered souls appeared across space, and among them was Solara's husband reaching for his family. His form touched each child's face, before fading into stardust with a smile. "Daddy loves you always." He whispered and was gone, but his love remained in his children's hearts. The Reaper fleet fell apart without the Overmind, and surviving ships fled into deep space while freed Lumini. Children landed on Earth seeking shelter. Most were orphans now, but humanity opened its arms. 6 months later, Sylara stood before the United Earth Council, not as a refugee, but as Earth's first alien citizen. Her children had grown in power and wisdom while teaching human children to weave light. "We are no longer the last Lumini," she said with joy, "because we are Earth's Lumini now, and our light will defend our home." Whisper chose to stay as guardian of Earth's refugees, while Shadowmend played with human children who saw him as the world's coolest pet. The elf woman founded a sanctuary for war orphans of all species. Captain Lisa Morgan's final report sat in the archives with one line highlighted forever. "Remember that our strength comes not from weapons or numbers, but from our willingness to say you are welcome here and mean it." The war continued among the stars, but Earth had become the beacon for the lost and the fortress for refugees, and the home for any who needed shelter. And in schools across the planet, human children learned beside alien younglings, while Lumini light merged with human determination to forge a future where different meant stronger, not dangerous. The stars no longer seemed cold, but full of potential, friends who just hadn't met humanity's strange compassion yet.